Good morning, Judge.
Morning.
You might have to indulge me. There was a emergency Badger State Sheriff's called at this very time, so I may be drifting in and out.
All right. Thank you for letting us know that. Lots of emergencies going on.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to take a few moments as we let everyone join before we get started with the meeting today.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Chief Judge Mary Trajano. Welcome to the Milwaukee Community Justice Council meeting of the whole. I think we have we certainly have a full agenda, and I do think we have close to 100 participants. So we will do our best to navigate through this. I hope everyone is healthy and happy and has been navigating this pandemic and some of the other things that the communities across the country and certainly here in the state of Wisconsin have been facing. I'm going to do a quick roll call so that I know who's on and so that the community knows who is in the panel here. I have from the City of Milwaukee Mayor's Jordan.
Good morning.
Good morning. I have District Attorney John Chisholm. I have Milwaukee County House of Correction Jose Hernandez.
Good morning.
have Supervisor Willie Johnson from the Board of Supervisors. Mandy, we're getting. Can everyone mute themselves if you're not muted already? Okay. I have Interim Director of the Department of Health and Human Services here in the county, Shakita LeGrant. I have Milwaukee County Sheriff Ernell Lucas. I have City of Milwaukee Police Chief Michael Brunson. I have Wisconsin Public Defender's Office Tom Reed. Wisconsin Department of Corrections, Community Corrections, Neil Thorson. Did I miss anybody who joined before the agenda actually went up on the screen? Okay, as I see people come in, I will try to announce from the executive committee and the panel who's here. So we do have a really robust agenda, so I'm going to get to it right away. First and foremost, it's my pleasure to introduce Interim Chief of Police Michael Brunson. Chief Brunson was appointed acting Chief of Police on August 6th after being in service to this community for the past 25 years in the Milwaukee Police Department. In the last several weeks, you can hear the urgency in his voice as he has outlined many of his priorities, including addressing violent crimes in the city, building relationships with the community, and forging necessary and important collaborations with those in this community, in particular the Community Justice Council. We are very grateful to have his presence here today to discuss his vision and priorities. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mandy to navigate his discussion and the questions that we have for him. Mandy?
Good morning, everyone. I guess, Chief Brunson, I would just like to open the floor for you and allow you to give a little bit of introduction of yourself and your vision with your new role.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I am Acting Chief Michael Brunson. As was stated previously, I've been a member of the Milwaukee Police Department for almost 25 years. It'll be 25 years in December. I started out as a police officer at District Number 5 in 1996. And from there, I worked at various districts. I was promoted about 5 years after that. I was assigned to the Internal Affairs Division as an investigator. While I was a sergeant, I was promoted to lieutenant and assigned once again to District Number 5 as a lieutenant. Was later promoted after about 4.5 years in that role to captain, where I was assigned to District Number 3. And subsequently, about 3 years later, I was promoted to deputy inspector, and I was the commander of the Internal Affairs Division. That was in 2013. In 2016, I was promoted to inspector of police and assigned to the Neighborhood Policing Bureau. And in 2018, I was assigned and promoted to assistant chief and remained assigned to the Patrol Bureau at that time. The neighborhood part of that was removed. And as was stated, August 7th, I was appointed the acting chief of police for the city of Milwaukee. So over my career, I've worked at every police district except 1 and 6, and internal affairs on 2 occasions as a sergeant and as a deputy inspector, as I stated. I do have a commitment to this city. I care about what happens in this city. And some of my priorities that I've mentioned before is first and foremost addressing the violent crime that is prevalent in our community. So far this year in 2020, we've had 115 homicides. That's compared to 58 at the same time last year. So obviously, the preservation of life is the most important thing that a law enforcement agency can engage in. Secondarily, to go along with that is the number of traffic fatalities that we've had this year. We are up 50% compared to last year, 2019, as it relates to traffic fatalities. So that's another one of my salient priorities. And thirdly, and extremely important, is that we need to engage, re-engage, and connect in meaningful ways with the community. One of the biggest challenges that we face right now as a law enforcement agency is the sentiment towards law enforcement that is not only here in Milwaukee, but across the country. And obviously, recent events in our jurisdiction just to the south of us is another setback, frankly, as it relates to police community relations, in addition to the incidents that we've seen occur across our country. And so obviously, to address the issues that I've mentioned previously, we need to have relationships. We need to have those engagements to address the problems. We as law enforcement cannot address the issues that we face in this community alone. We have to have those partnerships. We have to have trust with the community. And unfortunately, in those areas that we see the most violence is where we have the biggest challenge in addressing the issues that have occurred. And they're frankly some of our biggest detractors in those areas that we need to collaborate with most to address the issues that are impacting this community. So what are we doing moving forward to address some of these issues that I mentioned? We are committed. And right now I'm putting together a team that will assist me in addressing these issues. And we are willing to engage, even with detractors, to dialogue, to find out what their concerns are. We are willing to engage in initiatives with the community. We want to hear from the community and a broad sector of the community. And that's going to dovetail into one of the initiatives that we will be embarking on and have been embarking on, and that is the Milwaukee Project, in which we want citizens to participate in these speak outs. And then we want to get that feedback from the community so that we can see from a broad spectrum of individuals in our communities and neighborhoods so that we can work towards addressing some of those concerns. One of the things that many do not know is that the Milwaukee Police Department is currently engaged in a variety of things to address and to improve, to ameliorate our performance and professionalism. So right now, the Collins Agreement, there are a number of parameters. There's detailed training that continues in our academy that is going to help us to become a better agency, a more professional agency. In addition to that, we have made a commitment, and I am making a commitment to learn from our errors of the past. And one of the things that you have to be willing to do as a police agency is to examine yourself. Self-introspection is an important piece of becoming more professional, of improving and engaging. The public wants honesty from law enforcement leaders and agencies. They want an acknowledgement at times that mistakes have been made, that improvements can be made. And so that is the way that you improve, is by engaging, by acknowledging, and by making the commitment to move forward, and to improve. And so that is what we are committed to do, and that's what I'm committed to do as the leader of this agency. And so how does that happen? It happens, first of all, with every encounter that we have day to day. Our personnel are coming in contact with citizens hundreds of times a day. And so how do you regain trust? It's encounter by encounter, by showing the level of professionalism, by showing our level of concern to address their needs. And so that's what we're committed to do moving forward, is to addressing those needs, to holding officers accountable when that is necessary, to learning from mistakes and errors, and making a concerted effort to improve in the future. It's going to be a challenge. We're going to need all of our partners in the criminal justice system, all of our law enforcement partners also to work with us, in addition to faith-based leaders, community leaders, community-based organizations. It's going to take all of those entities working together to improve this city and, frankly, the environment right now towards policing. And it starts with action. And we're ready to take action to move forward together. And that's the only way that we are going to improve together. Thank you.
So there is a question, Chief, in the chat box. How do you envision being an advocate for expanding the system of prevention and harm reduction that address root causes of youth involvement with law enforcement?
One of the things that I believe is most important as it relates to addressing the prevention piece involves collaboration with community-based organizations and even governmental organizations that specialize in working on the front end of issues. Obviously, as law enforcement, we want to be involved in that, but obviously we're law enforcement, and so we have to address crimes after they occur. So I think the most effective thing that can be done as it relates to that is for us to work collaboratively with those entities that focus on the front end, be that job training, be that counselors. Schools are very, very important as it relates to the prevention piece, in addition to family supporting agencies and entities, because what we see is the breakdown in that family structure, and that contributes heavily to crime in our community. And we know that there's a variety of social issues that impact our community, and many of those things are at the elemental part of why crime occurs. And so that is our stance as far as partnering and working with some of those agencies that focus on the front end as it relates to crime and youth treatment and all of those factors.
Okay. Chief, another question. And I'm just going to read it verbatim so that I have it. When you state you want to hear from the community, doesn't it speak to common sense that we see individuals unarmed being shot or manhandled when unjustified? We can't seem to get law enforcement to see the humanity that is being disregarded.
So could you repeat that? I didn't really hear a question.
Well, I think it's more of a comment, but wanting you to address the comment. When you state you want to hear from the community, doesn't it speak to common sense that we see individuals unarmed being shot or manhandled when unjustified. We can't seem to get law enforcement to see the humanity that is being disregarded.
So, I mean, me personally, in looking at some of the incidents that have happened, and I think that many law enforcement leaders, in addition to law enforcement personnel, have looked at some of those incidents and acknowledged that they are wrong, totally wrong. So I think to make a statement that says that law enforcement can't obviously see, yes, we see, I've seen, obviously, as everyone else has, some of those incidents, and they're troubling. And so we can acknowledge that. And that is why we are examining ourselves as far as our policies and the things that we do. And as a matter of fact, right now, our Fire and Police Commission is reviewing some of our policies. September 24th, there's a meeting coming up in which some of our policies will be amended. I want to mention the 8 Can't Wait. 8 Can't Wait is a subset of the Campaign Zero, which looks at some of the practices of police agencies as it relates to policy. And if you look at the 8 Can't Wait standards, you'll see that, for example, the Milwaukee Police Department, 7 of those at least are things that are contained already in our standard operating procedures. Now, the 8th piece of that is one of the things that we will be discussing during the September 24th FPC meeting, and that piece will be added to our standard operating procedures. So I think that law enforcement leaders, law enforcement members, they see what is occurring, they see the protests, they see the demands that are coming from groups, citizens, etc. And I think things are happening. Things are changing. Those reviews are taking place. Training is taking place. So to say that law enforcement does not recognize and see that there are some problems that exist in law enforcement, I think is not a totally accurate statement.
Okay, thank you. We're getting both question and answers and questions from the chat box. So I'm going to try to navigate both sides to get most of them answered if we can. And I appreciate you answering the questions, Chief. So being MPD for 25 years and understanding there are people in the system with mental health issues, do you believe that police officers are the best first responders to nonviolent mental health crisis? If not, do you support carving off this function of police work in Milwaukee and assigning it to health professionals and social workers?
Yes, I have no objection to professionals, mental health professionals that obviously have expertise in addressing those concerns, in dealing with those calls. Now, I do want to say that the Milwaukee Police Department has engaged in extensive training of its personnel to deal with individuals who are going through a mental health crisis. However, of course, professionals who are trained in depth to address those concerns would be better to address those individuals who are nonviolent in nature. And we do have collaborations and partnerships with those individuals through our CART team. But as you stated, it has been spoken clearly throughout the country, frankly, and even here locally, that law enforcement, as it relates to certain social issues, is not the best to address that concern. However, one of the issues that we face is that mental health crises don't necessarily occur in a 9-to-5 setting. And so police are the one entity that functions 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. And so at 3 o'clock in the morning, when someone is going through a mental health crisis, then I think it's the standard that people call the police, because we are the entity that addresses things and we're always there. So would we object to mental health professionals handling those calls that they can handle? Absolutely not. And we think it's wholly appropriate.
And Chief, do you feel that officers are properly trained to handle these encounters, or do you think more training is needed?
I think that our officers are properly trained. We have went through extensive training over the last 3 to 4 years as it relates to that. Can additional training help? Yes, additional training can always help, but one of the things that we have to be mindful of as it relates to training too, is that much of our training is mandated by the state. And so we have to look at how much training we already have in a particular area and what is needed, and then what are the demands that will come on us from the state and from other entities. So I think training is always good. It's always excellent to learn additional information. I think that our officers are trained properly as it relates to address these type of calls, but are there entities that can handle those calls better? And that's been their lifelong engagement in those areas. Absolutely. I think they can handle those calls, with a level of expertise that obviously us not being mental health professionals, they can do that.
So you've been discussing forging trusting relationships with the community, but also really focusing on engaging collaborations. What are you seeing right now as the key organizations you need to work with and collaborate with?
Well, I mean, there are so many organizations and entities that we have relationships with, some stronger than others. I don't want to single out any organization because I inevitably leave someone out, but I think any organization that is concerned and committed to improving the environment in the communities, in the neighborhoods, then we're committed to working with them. Myself and my team here, and in addition to the districts, the 7 district captains have always been empowered to engage and to work with community-based organizations that are trying to improve conditions at the neighborhood level. And that will continue. And we will redouble our efforts as it relates to that, because as I stated, we can't do this alone. It's not a spectator sport. Public safety, and obviously building relationships, you have to connect. You have to engage, and that's what we're committed to do moving forward.
Thank you. So, question from Eugene Nelson from Project Return. Our organization works with returning citizens, and unfortunately, this particular demographic is looked upon poorly. How can relationships with law enforcement be strengthened to assist us and other like-minded organizations with positive reintegration?
So right now, we do have relationships with some agencies and entities that focus in that realm, because we believe that positive reintegration is positive for all of us. If we have individuals who have been incarcerated and are now returning to the community, it's a benefit to everyone to have those individuals be rehabilitated, to obtain family sustaining jobs, and to not recidivize. That is very important. And so we are committed to working with any entity that is working towards that common goal. And we have in the past. One of the entities that we are working with is Partners in Hope. And their focus is on individuals who have served their time and are now being reintegrated in the community. So we are committed to doing that and expanding our outreach as much as we can.
Thank you. I got a couple of questions that may focus on the budget, the MPD's budget, as well as budget cuts. Do you think that it is appropriate for Milwaukee to spend 45% of its operating budget on police, knowing that means there are less funds to go go towards addressing root causes?
Well, one of the things that we have to be mindful of is the need, the calls for service, the level of violence in the community, the level of reckless driving. We talked about a lot of the issues that we face now as a community. And to address many of those issues, you need personnel to address that. You need law enforcement personnel to address many of the concerns. And so I have heard the calls to defund the police, cut the police budget, those type of things. And so we have to look at the calls for service that we respond to as an agency. And we have to identify intelligently those entities that are going to take up those calls for service if in fact our budget is cut. We all know right now, because of the pandemic, that the revenue of our city right now and cities across the country has been severely impacted. So there's a good chance, and this has been widely discussed, that our budget will be cut in 2021. And so what we have to do is look at those calls for service, look at the services that we provide, and intelligently find a way and an entity that can handle those calls for service. We have to make sure that that is in place, however, because if we don't, then the citizens of this community could potentially suffer because of that.
Thank you. So there's a variety of more questions that I can ask. I want to be mindful of your time because you've been so gracious to be here on the panel. Are you okay if we continue on maybe another 10 minutes?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Another issue potentially related to budget cuts. The police department appears to be behind on meeting deadlines set up in the Collins settlement. When do you anticipate catching up? Given inevitable budget cuts coming your way, how will you comply with the settlement's requirements?
So complying with the requirements is something that we're committed to doing. And one of the key members of my team has been instrumental in addressing and working to complete and to help us to achieve those benchmarks and parameters. And we are committed to doing that. It's been 2 years now that we've been engaged in this. There are 3 more, and we are committed to reaching those benchmarks and to working feverishly to accomplish that. So that is one of our top priorities, obviously, is to satisfy the requirements that are set before us, and it's going to make us improve as an agency. That's the most important thing, is that the improvement in professionalism that we will see and the gains that we will see as it relates to that, as it relates to the Collins agreement.
Thank you. So speaking of professionalism, what is being done with officers who are known to be antagonistic during public encounters? I have personally seen officers engage disrespectfully, and therefore de-escalation did not appear to be anywhere in their approach.
Okay, so one of the things that we are emphasizing is professionalism. And so reviewing, looking at body cameras, monitoring complaints that come in, those are some of the tools that we will utilize to address those issues. When officers are in the public and when they are rude, when they are uncivil towards citizens, it impacts all of us. As I spoke, we have to engage, we have to build those relationships. And so when those type of things occur, it negatively impacts all of us and it reverberates throughout the department. And so we are committed to addressing those issues. It's important for citizens to understand also that when those incidents occur, they need to move forward, say something about it, and file a complaint so we can look into that. Because sometimes citizens may vent to others about a situation that occurred, how an officer treated them, but unless we can look into that officially and address it officially, then it's just going to be that. It's going to be a talking point. But we need to get to the heart of the matter. And we are committed to rooting out those officers that this is a pattern for, because it's only going to negatively impact all of us if we have officers that continue to engage in that type of conduct.
Thank you. Jeff Roman, the new director of the Office of African American Affairs. How does the chief and CJC intend to work with the city's Collaborative Community Commission, which has similar goals and is meeting at the very same time this morning?
So, as I stated, I'm committed to working with, having dialogue with any group that is looking to improve the environment of this city. So I'm not going to say that one group is more or less important than another. If groups are committed to working with us, to improving, then we are committed to working with them.
Thank you. Jeff, from the CJC standpoint as well, I would answer very similarly than the chief did just now, is that we are, as a CJC, committed to as well to working with other community groups and commissions. And so connecting with Mandy, whoever is in charge of that group, is really important, so that we can also see what your goals and focuses are, so that we can look at collaborating together. I think I have one more here. Hello, Chief. My name is Leonard Simpson, Director of the Justice Involved Populations at the Wisconsin Technical College System. You mentioned education to be an important part of improving disparities in the city of Milwaukee. Is there contact information for a navigator with the department to discuss possible collaborations?
Yes. Right now, we will have our patrol heads that will head that up. So right now, Inspector Leslie Teely and Captain Willie Murphy are two of the entities that will be engaging in that respect in the near future. So yes, we do have individuals that will be focusing as it relates to that.
Okay. Let's see, one more. If you believe things like schools, counseling, job training are vital for crime prevention, what can MPD or the city do to make sure those areas are fully funded? I'm sure that might be one for the city at some point, but if you want to take a stab at it, Chief, that'd be great.
I mean, as far as funding for schools and things of that nature, that's something that's out of the police department's purview. So I can't speak to that. That would be a question that would have to go to, obviously the common council, the mayor, et cetera, as it relates to that. So we don't obviously control the budget and where it goes in the city.
Thank you. I just want to ask if any of the executive committee members have a question or two for the chief. Otherwise, we'll profusely thank him for his time on the panel. Anybody? Okay. Chief Brunson, you've been wonderful taking the time. I know you're really, really busy. Certainly we all are, but taking the time to come to the CJC community meeting and answer the questions is certainly a start in the right direction in terms of collaborating and getting information out to the community. So much, much appreciated. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And thanks to everyone.
Thank you. All right, Mandy, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Chief. Both chiefs, actually, Chief Brunson as well as Chief Trajano. I'm going to share my screen here for a few moments here, just to give a overview and walk through an update on the MacArthur Safety and Justice Challenge. All right. Let me put this into presentation mode here. Shrink that so I can see what I'm doing. All right. So my hope in providing this MacArthur Safety and Justice Challenge update this morning is really to rely on some of my other partners who are also on the call today, because this really has been a collaborative effort over the last 5 years. So just to give a brief overview for anyone who has not participated in any of our Safety and Justice Challenge work, which I would encourage you to do. The Safety and Justice Challenge was started back in 2015 by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. Commencing in 2015, Milwaukee County was selected out of over 200 applicants to become a partner site in the Safety and Justice Challenge. It's now grown to over 52 sites across the country and really has 3 primary goals: reducing over-reliance or unnecessary use of local jails, reducing racial and ethnic disparities within criminal justice systems, as well as increasing community engagement in criminal justice reform efforts. Our work here in Milwaukee County started in mid-2015 by convening local leaders and stakeholders in partnership with some technical assistance experts, such as the Vera Institute, as well as many others, to identify some of the main drivers of our local jail population and examine areas where racial and ethnic disparities existed. We spent nearly 6 months working with our partners and digging deeper into the data to better understand and develop some key strategies that we felt confident would lower our average daily jail population without impacting or compromising public safety. On this slide, I've included some of our key strategies that were implemented from 2016 to 2018, and again, in our most recent round of work from 2018 to the present. We have a ton of information on our website, which is milwaukee.gov/CJC. And if you want to get directly to the materials, the website is www.milwaukee.gov/CJC/SJC to take a look at some of the one-pagers and updates that we've put together over the course of our initiative work. I want to underscore just a couple of new developments that I want everyone to be aware of that are coming down the pipeline. As Chief Brunson talked about community engagement, I just want to underscore the importance of community engagement in the work that we're doing and our both intention as well as commitment to engaging with community members, community groups in an authentic way that allows for shared prioritization and planning amongst criminal justice partners. We have engaged in dialogue with an agency named Everyday Democracy, and we hope to pursue a partnership and develop a full, robust continuum of ways community can be involved in individual strategies, as well as larger criminal justice reform efforts here within Milwaukee County. Part of this work will include some strategic planning and dialogues like Chief Brunson had discussed with their Milwaukee project. We too hope to engage you and other community groups in sharing your input and your priorities for criminal justice reform, areas where you see opportunities for us to engage in new and innovative ways that we can be more effective at the work that we do here in Milwaukee County. So part of this community engagement strategy is not only just engaging community in these dialogues and shared prioritization and meetings, we also are in the works of releasing community subgrants. In partnership with the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, we hope to take a good portion of our, over 50% of our community engagement funds and release those into community subgrants to help support some of the grassroots work happening out in the community. We're actively developing the request for proposals and the priority funding areas for that, But I just want to preface this that we want these RFPs to go far and wide into the community so that there are opportunities for some of the smaller groups that may not have full-time grant writers and the ability to manage large complex grants, the opportunity to receive some seed funding that will really help advance some of the work that's already going on out in the community. And then thirdly, as was asked, and I'll just address it here as well, we too, within our MacArthur Safety and Justice Challenge grant, recognize the need to support people who are returning to the community. For many years, we have worked on front-end strategies to deflect people from the criminal justice system and find ways to create off-ramps, if you will, from the justice system. But that cannot be done without thinking about making sure people who are coming out of our justice system are set up to be successful and prevent either further victimization in the community or cycling through the justice system. And so we are actively hosting reentry council meetings to align criminal justice, community agencies, and people who have been, excuse me while I stop my screen share here, people who have been incarcerated or justice involved in the past, to really inform ways that we as a justice system and community can be more supportive during that time of transition back to the community. And so we, prior to COVID, had implemented a number of what we were calling home to stay resource fairs, which were standing collaborative resource fairs dedicated to people returning to the community and their families to ensure that they had the tools at their fingertips to be able to be successful upon reentry. Because of COVID-19, we have migrated those reentry resource fairs online and have an active website that is regularly updated with different employment opportunities, navigating ways to access other reentry friendly resources, including housing and social services, as well as other things. So I do want to just make mention of that because I know that Chief Brunson had a question asked of him about reentry supports. And then I would just also welcome any additional dialogue from members of the executive committee, as well as Aaron Perkins, who is also a panelist today, who is our Safety and Justice Project Manager, to provide any additional updates that you'd like to the community this morning.
Mandy, just real quick, there was a question in the chat about how does one find out more about community subgrants that you just mentioned?
So as I mentioned, we're still working to develop those subgrants. My intention is that once they are ready to be released publicly, the application that is ready to be released publicly, we will go far and wide in spreading that information and give an adequate amount of time to complete what we hope to be a very low barrier application process. And so to be more specific, my intention would be to send, at minimum, send it out amongst the distribution list for this meeting, which is upwards of 2,000 individuals, as well as throughout social media, and asking all the partner agencies to further spread the message as well.
Anybody else from on the exec who wants to chime in? I don't see any other questions either. Aaron?
I don't have, I think, Mandy, you did a great job of covering the Safety and Justice Challenge, and I would just echo what you said about visiting the website and checking out some of the different materials there. We did just recently release a 2-page or 3-page document just with some updates about COVID-19 in the criminal justice system. And we will definitely continue working with our local as well as our SJC partners to unpack the impact of COVID-19 on the criminal justice system, as well as the policies and practices that have been implemented during this time on the criminal justice system. So yes, just definitely be sure to check out the website. And as far as the subgrants are concerned, we just revisited the RFP draft that we had, and we wanted to scale it back just given the demands on people's time and their resources. Right now, we didn't want to make it overcomplicated. So it'll likely shift just to be a SurveyMonkey type document with some complementary background documents on Google Drive that people can take a look at, just because we didn't want to demand an extensive RFP from people. So like Mandy said, you can anticipate finding out more about that through our Facebook page, through our newsletter, and any other sort of distribution list that we have accessible to us as a CJC.
Thank you. Tom? Anything to add?
I think the one comment I would make that is, worth mentioning in the context of this MacArthur Foundation grant work is, first, Milwaukee has for a long time been interested in being, having significant reform in its criminal justice system. Before the MacArthur Foundation came here, maybe because of this, that's why they chose us. We had worked on, having evidence-based tools at the front door of our criminal justice system. The county has made a significant investment in universal screening. We've used those risk assessment strategies to put cases into diversions and into the drug treatment court, into our small mental health pilot project. So we had embarked on a lot of reform efforts, starting, 10 or more years ago. MacArthur has allowed us to do a certain amount that we couldn't do without their funding, and the generosity of the foundation is really important in order to really dig deep into these systems and make changes. But the comment I wanted to make this morning is that I think the foundation of that was laid by having all this work being done was really essential when the pandemic hit, because suddenly we went from a situation where we had operating court systems and we had a lot of ability to run daily programming and other activities. We had that on March 1st. Probably by March 18th or March 20th, all that was shut down. And the only way that we've been able to manage to keep the court system running, to keep some of these processes functioning at a high level, is because people had very strong working relationships. The Community Justice Council has seen this work in its meetings over the many years that we have been meeting. But I just want to highlight that, the investment in the relationships, the investment in collaboration pays enormous dividends when it comes to dealing with crises. And I think that the fact that we have other crises that we have to deal with should strengthen our commitment to a collaborative approach, which the work prior to MacArthur, the work with MacArthur, the work that MacArthur is going to allow us to do in terms of community engagement, these are all designed to strengthen our capacity, collaborative capacity. And I think it's essential if we're going to make progress as a community. And it's going to be essential if we are going to be successful at the prevention and harm reduction strategies, which are much more effective when we can make them work, than law enforcement suppression efforts, which are important. I don't want to understate that, but they come after something has happened, and we'd like to do as much as we can to prevent things from happening in the first place.
Great, thank you, Tom. I think we're gonna segue to our next agenda item because we're running up against some time here. So almost 10:30. And I know we were going to look at giving some updates from the executive committee members about what's been happening in their various organizations since COVID hit and up until now. And I'm going to segue if Jose Hernandez is okay with this. I'm going to start with him, but there is a question out there that might help precipitate your discussion, Jose. Are there any protocols for clergy to begin incarcerated spiritual visits being developed? So Jose, if you could answer potentially that question and then give a little bit of update in terms of the numbers in the House of Correction, that would be great.
Sure, Chief. Good morning, everyone. Jose Hernandez. I'm the interim superintendent of the Milwaukee County House of Correction. To answer the question that was posed, we actually brought back our chaplaincy staff already. So we have one female, 2 male chaplains that have returned, and we're doing limited services, one-on-one counseling with social distancing, masks, hand sanitizers, and all the precautions in place. In addition to that, we brought back our Employ Milwaukee partnership for the job center. So we implemented the job search program, which includes resumes and things like that. So Jeanette is back with us, and she's doing some of the interviews remotely through our video system, and others she is allowed in the building to do some things. Our Franklin Public Schools program is going to resume in person in September. And after that, we will start introducing other programs based on, how we're being affected both with the virus as it pertains to those in custody and staff. So, we're taking a nice slow crawl forward, and we'll move back as needed, but we will always continue to move ahead as much as we can. So for those of you, I know there's a lot of folks that have participated in some of our reentry and restoration programming. We haven't forgotten about you. We have everybody on our list, and we will be contacting you as we move forward. So feel free to check in with me or Captain Hutchins anytime, and we'd love to let you know where we stand. So far, as far as the operations of the institution, we have 7 people in custody that are currently COVID positive, all asymptomatic, housed separately. And I will note that we've been collaborating with CJF to ensure that we aren't housing people with medical needs in the form of a restricted housing. So that's why we move people back and forth to provide a better environment for the recovery process. We have a housing unit specifically with reverse air. So anyone that's COVID positive can reside there and still have all of the privileges that are available during incarceration without feeling as though they're being disciplined. So, so far that's working very well. Folks are recovering and being moved back to general population or released from custody. So as far as our population, it's significantly down. As of today, we're at 809, and that's a big decrease based on a number of factors. Specifically, we've worked with the public defender's office, the chief, and the DA's office to look at releasing those. And I don't want to speak out of turn. The chief knows better on the criteria, and Tom, that we're releasing some folks early to keep those numbers down. So that's been working quite well. As far as staff, we're doing very well during this pandemic in maintaining our staffing levels, surprisingly. Much of the kudos goes to the county board for initiating the pay step increases that allowed us to retain staff. As far as them being out with COVID, there's an ebb and flow there. Occasionally we'll have some folks out that are, may have been exposed by someone they had contact with, but overall the positives have been very, very limited and not impactful on the operations. So with that, I guess I can take any questions, or Chief, if you have anything to add.
No, I don't see any questions in the chat box, and I know we're running a little bit behind, so I think we'll move on. If there's a chat question that comes up, I'll certainly readdress it with you, Jose. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah, I'm going to just jump in and do a quick statement on the courts. I'll play off of what Tom Reed just said, that because of a history of collaboration and connection and coordination, the CJC membership and others have come together. And, 5 months ago, we almost shut the courts down. We are now up and running. We're about back to 70%. Most of it's still via Zoom, but we do have some physical presence in the courtroom with about anywhere from 12 to 14 courts, which includes 2 jury trial courtrooms. And I'm grateful for the collaborations. We couldn't have done that without some of the people on the Zoom meeting here today, as well as thanking the county exec for providing us with a county team, which included facilities management, space planners, carpenters, IT professionals, and I think key to this too was public health consultants, so that as we came up safely and with everyone's safety in mind. I think one of the biggest things that we've been talking about in the meetings that we've had is reopening with an eye towards improving the way we do things in the courthouse. I think when crisis hits, you really come to understand and know all the intricacies and complications of a system. And it uncovers certainly some things that absolutely need to be changed. And then it uncovers some strengths, but as I mentioned, weaknesses as well. And so we are looking towards putting in some reforms that make access to justice easier for individuals. And we will continue to look at those kinds of things across systems, not just in the criminal justice system, but in all the systems that we have and the divisions that we have as well. And I think that's important. We also want to look at recovering in the courts with an eye towards racial equity. And so we are working collaboratively with others in the community and in the justice system to do that as well. We think there's certainly urgent need to relook at what we're doing on a variety of levels and making it better. I do want to highlight the fact that we have started jury trials over the last 4 months with a variety of safety measures in place and a plea to the community to fulfill your civic duty. We have usually in any given week, pre-COVID, we've done 10 to 12 jury trials, mostly in the criminal justice system. When you go down to 0, those trials back up. Trials for people in custody back up. And we knew that we needed to make that a priority. We now have 2 jury trials up. We have plexiglass, mask policies, hand sanitizing. And the comments from jurors have been really well received in that they were grateful for the fact that we went to the extremes that we did to try to keep them safe, as well as the people who come into the courthouse. So that's really important. On the county's website, there is a jury video. County Exec Crowley, Deputy Chief Judge Carl Ashley, and others are in that video. I encourage you to take a look at it. We are trying to get information out to the community on how safe, reasonably safe our courts are during this pandemic. I think Mandy just put the website in the chat box for you to take a look at. Those are some of the steps we are taking to ensure the safety of the individuals that come into the courthouse. So with that, I'm going to open it up to any other executive committee members that might want to give a brief update on what they're doing in their organizations.
Chief Judge Trigiano,
Yes.
County Supervisor Willie Johnson Jr. An observation, during the month of August, the county board did not meet with respect to its committees and a county board meeting. But however, there's an office, the Milwaukee County Office of Emergency Management COVID-19 dashboard. And for a 2-week period, there were no increases in deaths for African Americans and for Hispanic Latino Americans, a 2-week period. I don't know if you would look at that as a great victory for the community and a miracle, but at least for a 2-week period, day after day after day for about 14 days, there were no deaths, at least reported through the COVID-19 dashboard. I just wanted to put that out there. I do look at the dashboard most days, and if numbers are not changing from day to day to day to day, then at least for 2 weeks, then at least that's my observation. Thank you, Chief Judge.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor. That's really important information. The dashboard contains a lot of information. I also encourage people to look at that on a daily basis. Mandy also just put that in the chat room for everyone. Thank you, Mandy. Anyone else from the executive committee that would like to give an update?
Judge Trigiano, I'd be happy to add a couple things on behalf of the city.
Yes, go ahead.
Jordan, City of Milwaukee. I just wanted to point out a couple of things to everyone watching. The city's beginning their preliminary budget hearings tonight. There's going to be a presentation from our budget director, Dennis Yacarino, and Alderman Murphy tonight from 5 to 7 p.m. There's also a budget simulation tool through the city website for citizens to submit their own proposed budgets. It's a very interesting tool to see where you can cut back and what needs to be cut to meet the financial challenges during COVID-19. And people can then make their own proposed cuts to the budget and then submit it to the city for review. And then also a couple weeks ago, Mayor Barrett announced $15 million in additional rental support for City of Milwaukee residents. Those are for grants up to $3,000 for rental support and assistance. Those grants are being run through the community advocates and the Social Development Corporation. So for those people struggling with meeting their rental obligations during the pandemic, the city's been able to make another $15 million available of support. And so I just wanted to point out those two things to everyone on the call today.
Jordan, thank you very much. We appreciate the update.
Thank you.
Other updates?
I just have one quick comment. We are very willing to receive from anyone in the community, and anyone who's sitting in a correctional institution, a request if you would like to have us take a look to see whether it is possible for us to appoint a lawyer to pursue a request for a modification of sentence. I want to emphasize that the truth in sentencing law and the court decisions that interpret how sentence modifications are to be handled create really significant restrictions on when a lawyer can be appointed and when a relief of any sort can be granted. On the other hand, what COVID-19 has highlighted is that there's great danger in congregate settings. For that reason, the jail and the House of Corrections population, for example, which maybe in January would have been 1,800 people, has hovered between, say, 1,250 and 1,400 as a result of various efforts that have been made. The state prison is in a different status, but still there are people who are sitting in state prison who may be appropriately brought forward for to a court for a possible reduction in their sentence. Usually that's a reduction in their confinement time. They get put on extended supervision a little earlier. I don't want to open expectations unreasonably because it's very difficult, but I want you to know that you can certainly contact us and we will take a look at anyone who comes forward or their family if they come forward and see if there's any kind of relief that's appropriately available to be pursued.
Thank you. So, and I would be remiss if I forgot to mention at the last executive committee meeting, we had a presentation about a report from the Human Rights Watch organization and the ACLU called Revoked: How Probation and Parole Feed Mass Incarceration in the United States. And while it was broad-based and covered the United States, there were 3 states that were the focus of their report, and that included Milwaukee County. I would suggest that the data was eye-opening, and the executive committee will continue to look at how we can use that data to find ways to improve what we're doing in the criminal justice system. But I encourage you to read it. If you have comments or questions about it, certainly contact us and thoughts on how to make things better in the system concerning probation and parole. So thank you for that. Any other comments from the executive?
I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to also speak on behalf of Dr. Connie Kostelak from the Medical College about their release of the Milwaukee Homicide Review Commission dashboards. Unfortunately, Dr. Kostelak was not able to be here with us today, but I did let her know that I would share the link in the chat during the meeting, and we will likely have a brief update from her again at a future meeting.
Okay. Thanks for putting that on there, Mandy. We're about almost 11:15. I think we've probably been in Zoom for way too long, but lots of good information and updates, and we appreciate everyone's patience in us trying to get out this information. We will certainly continue to have the community meetings of the whole. I think it's very important. I think we all believe that as well. And I think with that, unless there's any final comments from the executive committee, I don't see any other questions and answers or anything in the chat. We will likely then end this meeting and thank everybody. Any final comments?
Thank you, Judge.
Everyone, please stay safe and healthy. We appreciate all the input. Contact me or us if you have questions about the courts and the court operations and the justice system. I'm certainly willing to outreach and have those conversations with you. So thank you, everybody. Take care. Tom and Mandy, if you could hang on for a minute.
Sure.